Joining us now, former ambassador, Ann Pat. I got to tell you, we love getting Ann on because Ambassador Ann Patterson, knows this region maybe better than anybody in America. I mean, think about this. She serves as ambassador to Pakistan. She served as ambassador to Egypt, right? Just starting out. And she was also very, very involved in a lot of things that go on in the Middle East. And she's presently the president of the U.S. Qatar Council. And she also served as Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs from 2013 to 2017. And she's with us now. Ambassador Patterson, thank you for being with us.
No, thank you very much, John. It's always a pleasure to be on your show.
I love having you on because your perspective is so clear and unique based on your experience and what you've done. You know, I see what's going on with this shutdown drone, and we hear the sabers rattling, and we hear Tom Cotton talking about dropping bombs on Tehran. And as I said in my opening, God knows what John Bolton's saying in there. How do we ratchet this thing down?
Well, yeah, John, this incident with the drone is exactly the way situations escalate. The Iranians are claiming it was in their airspace. We're claiming it was in international airspace. Many wars have started over these confusing incidents. But how we ratchet it down is we get somebody, some country, some people we trust to try and mediate this. And I thought a few weeks ago there were efforts in that regard. The Japanese Prime Minister went there. The administration was in touch with the Swiss. They were in touch with Qatar, with Oman. So you get a trusted intermediary to try and ratchet the situation down. Now, we have to protect the shipping lanes. That's a critical national security interest. But we have to ratchet this down. We simply cannot afford, in terms of money or lives, another war in the Middle East.
Well, the other thing you have is the president campaigned very vigorously, Ambassador, on getting out of these Middle Eastern entanglements. I mean, that was a key piece of his platform. And people have asked me, is there any way Trump can get beat in 2020? And I've told people the last 2 days in Orlando, yes, if we get into another war, he will not get reelected because that'll be one of the biggest promises he went back on. But when you look at the situation, you always have to be concerned about the number of people that are advising him that are interventionalists and they want to flex U.S. muscle around the globe. And for those of you that don't know, when I say the word neocon, this comes from the Irving Kristol wing of basically the Republican and the old Scoop Jackson wing of the Democratic Party that sees military action as the answer to everything. And that's why we call them the neocons. How do we be sure that the president is getting the right advice so that we don't get involved in this thing getting escalated?
Well, John, I mean, sometimes you have to use military force. I mean, sometimes you have to throw a punch. That's necessary. So I certainly don't want to sound like someone who's opposed to military force. But this doesn't seem like one of those situations to me. And I think I told your listeners one time before that when I was ambassador to Pakistan, and admittedly we had a huge presence in Afghanistan, we were spending $10 billion a month in Afghanistan. And think what something like that could do. I'm from Arkansas, to alleviate the flooding that we just saw in Arkansas. So there's huge amounts of money that go into this. But Congress needs to assert itself on the ability to wage war. Your listeners need to assert themselves by letting their elected representatives know. People in the press like yourself need to talk about this. And in fairness, I think the president, as you say, has made a promise. And from everything I see in the press and elsewhere, he is very reluctant to get into another pointless fight in the Middle East.
Well, that's the one thing we've got going for us. I know that from talking to him myself from time to time that especially in during the campaign in 2016 when I had a lot more access to him, that he was very suspect. He's very suspicious of these things. And so his first general reaction is to wait and see what he can do diplomatically, and hopefully we can continue to do that. I also have to ask, I know we talked about this a week ago, but for the life of me, I am still trying to figure out why the Iranian Revolutionary Guard would be blowing holes in tankers in the Straits of Hormuz. It has no military value. It has no strategic value. It has no political value. One of your counterparts said that the commanders of the Revolutionary Guard might be rogue, but then we've got other people like that. There was a shipping magnate from Japan that said that what he saw was, from his angle, was that these firings were not coming from Iran. They came from somewhere else. So, and anything that comes out of the UAE, I don't believe, because it's like they have their whole media there is fake news, The Onion. So why would the Iranians try to blow up tankers in the Straits of Hormuz?
Well, John, when this first came out, I think a lot of people shared your suspicion. I mean, I certainly did, and many people I talked to who followed the Middle East, it just didn't look credible. But I think that if what I say, administration officials are certainly telling the truth, that this is a consensus of the U.S. intelligence community, and there are lots of theories out there, like the Iranians were basically trying to get our attention. But keep in mind, there are probably conflicting views in Iran, and who knows what kind of advisors their leaders have, too. I mean, there's probably hardliners and people that want to negotiate. So who knows? I don't think we've ever had a picture, certainly not in the past 20 years, a very good picture of what's going on inside the Iranian leadership. So it's very hard to answer, I think, why they would have made this decision. Do they have hardliners that were trying to provoke a response? Did they hope to just send a message and then mediators would jump in? It's very hard to tell. Very hard to tell. But that's why these situations are so dangerous, because they can escalate so quickly by misjudgments on either side.
I just think that is what you just said there. I think I had on Monday, I had a former ambassador to Qatar, Chase Uttermeyer, on, who said that his theory, this was just a theory, hypothesis, was that rogue Revolutionary Guard commanders are not really happy with the Central Authority, and Iran did this on their own in order to provoke a response. So that was his theory. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
All right, we're with Ambassador Ann Patterson, former ambassador for the United States to Pakistan and Egypt, and also served as a Assistant Secretary of State, Far East of the U.S. From 2013 to 2017. The Kuwait Emir is set to visit Iraq over the Gulf Rift. Kuwait trying to play middleman in solving the GCC blockade between the Saudis, Bahrain, UAE, and Egypt on Qatar. And Kuwait has so far been unsuccessful, but now their emir going to Iraq. Do you see any possible opening here that we could get the GCC back together and then this Qatar blockade, which has been, to be honest, for the Saudis, a complete and utter disaster?
Oh, John, I'm afraid I don't. You have to give the Kuwaitis credit, and particularly the emir. He's 83 years old, and he's one of the savviest players on the globe. And you have to give him credit for really, really trying to resolve this. But I just don't see any way through it at this point. I think there was a glimmer, or certainly I felt a glimmer of hope when the Qatari Prime Minister went to the meeting in Riyadh a few weeks back, but that didn't result in anything. If anything, it probably dug them in more deeply, and Qatar just sees no reason to. In fact, in some respects, they benefited for the blockade, but no, I just don't see any way around this, and at the time being. The emir is coming, the Qatari emir is coming to Washington in the next 3 weeks, and I'm sure this will be on his agenda and on President Trump's agenda, too.
Well, that's sort of an unprecedented meeting, because this is going to be the third time the emir of Qatar has gone to Washington. I think he's going there on July the 9th. Obviously, you're not going to be seeing Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman welcome in the U.S. after the UN report came out. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this is going to be the third visit to D.C. by the emir in a 2.5-year period, the emir of Qatar. What do you think drove that, and what do you think, other than that one, the issue that you're talking about, the Gulf crisis is going to be on the agenda?
Well, I think there are a lot of things on the agenda. First, there's the huge commercial activity that's underway in Qatar right now with the expansion of their natural gas facility. So that's very important from an industry standpoint. Secondly, I think Iran is going to be on the agenda, and then I think the conference which will be over, but the conference in Bahrain, and some economic assistance for the Palestinians. So I think there are lots of issues. But what I've seen over the past couple of years is the emir and President Trump seem to have a good personal relationship.
Yeah, I mean, better than it certainly was starting out, I think, at the beginning.
Right.
The president had probably a lot of conflicting advice. And one thing the Saudis have done very well, if you're in D.C., ambassador like we are, is they got an army of lobbyists. And, lobbyists matter in D.C. We can make fun of the swamp and whatever, but they've got an army of them running around. They got deep ties to a lot of different people. And so I think at the beginning of this, they were able to penetrate the White House with some bad information. But I think, what you found from this president is, whether you like him or not, or what he's doing, but what you have to admit is he's going to make his own decisions at the end of the day, and he's going to evaluate the situation, get his advice, but over time he's going to make his own decisions, as he's doing with Iran right now. And I think as he's looked at everything that's gone on, and we've got the biggest base in the Middle East in Qatar there, I think he's taking maybe a different look than he did when this crisis first happened. So let's get to, and we're with Ambassador Ann Patterson. She's president of the U.S. Qatar Council. She's former U.S. ambassador to Egypt and Pakistan, and recently served as Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs 2013 to 17. So let's get to the UN report yesterday.
Oh yes, the one on Jamal Khashoggi.
Oh my goodness! Did you read that? Just so everybody knows.
Actually, I did read that, and I must admit, John, I followed this issue pretty closely, and even that report had details that I'd never heard before. And actually, I thought it was absolutely devastating and chilling, frankly, to read the discussion of how they were going to chop up Khashoggi before any of this even happened, and before they saw him. Of course, there was no accident or no got out of control or they had a fight or none of that. It was absolutely premeditated murder. So I think this puts, to be frank, the administration in a difficult position, and it gives Congress a lot of ammunition now to ban arms sales to Saudi Arabia. So the timing couldn't have been worse, but the report was just jaw-dropping.
This is really a disaster for Jared Kushner because, look, I like Jared. I know him personally. I think he's really smart, and I think he's done a really good job in a lot of things in being a senior advisor to President Trump. But this is really, I mean, he's the one that made the centerpiece of his peace plan, Mohammed bin Salman. He thought he was young. He thought he was a reformer. Now he's finding out he's a complete thug. I mean, you read this thing. I always knew he was behind it. I mean, logic just pointed to it, and I've said that in the media for a long time. But you read the details of this, and it's incredible how they pre-planned this gruesome dismemberment of this of Khashoggi. But then the other thing is, as a former ambassador in an administration, so Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman gets on the phone, gets on the bat phone, and he tells the leader of the free world, President Trump, that he had nothing to do with this. So he lied to the president on the phone. How do you go forward? How do you have any relationship with a world leader when the president knows that the guy got on the phone and told him a bold-faced lie to the president of the United States? How do you go forward with any relationship after that? As a former ambassador, how do you go forward with that?
So, John, to me, this is the most worrisome thing about the whole situation. Certainly the murder of Jamal Khashoggi is a horrible, horrible thing. But what really, I think, is very worrisome from a strategic sense is this young man thought he could blow off the President of the United States. And Senator Lindsey Graham said something along these lines, too, that you just can't lie to the President of the United States and blow him off without consequences. And so I don't know how you recover from that. General Abizaid, Ambassador Abizaid, is out there now, and I'm sure he's trying to work through this. And as far as I could tell, we didn't demand that they, for instance, release the female activists that they've tortured and jailed, or ratchet back some of the things they are doing in Yemen. So I don't know what we're doing, but that's actually very worrisome that he feels free. I mean, keep in mind, John, that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is utterly dependent on the United States of America for its security, utterly dependent, and its ability to export oil. So they shouldn't be allowed to, frankly, just tell the President of the United States to get lost like they did. And this General Assiri they've arrested now, apparently blaming him for the murder of Khashoggi. He used to come sit in my office in the State Department, and it's inconceivable he would have done this without orders from on high. Just inconceivable.
Well, he wouldn't have, and now they're going to probably execute him. That's their complete disregard for human life as a scapegoat, so he gets his head chopped off or whatever they do over there. But I don't think you're going to see MBS. I don't think he can come to the United States again. I certainly don't think he can ever go in the Oval Office. And I would have to think that President Trump right now, deep down, has got to be very concerned about the situation to have somebody get on the phone and lie to you. I mean, it's one thing to position and jawbone and like what the Chinese did. I mean, they committed to certain things in the trade deal, then they backed out. Whatever, okay? But it's not like Z got on the phone with him and lied to him. And right. I just don't see how the President of the United States can go forward with taking this guy seriously in anything he does.
And John, the real loss here is the U.S.-Saudi relationship. I mean, people like me who've lived in Saudi Arabia, who follow the Middle East, we realize that Saudi Arabia is a strategically important country, and all this with Yemen and Khashoggi and all this has just done such severe damage to the overall relationship that ultimately that may be the highest cost of all.
Ms. Ambassador, final question here. Does MBS stay in power, or are other Saudi leaders going to see him as the liability he is? Is there a way out for them? What about his father? Can there be a change? I know that's
John,
a sensitive
that's
question.
A hotly debated question among people who follow the Middle East. And there's certainly very serious scholars who think that he won't survive his father's death, that his father's health is not good, as people know, and he's not young. The father isn't young. King Salman isn't young. And that what really protects MBS is his father. So there are a number of scholars on the Middle East who think that, frankly, the royal family will turn on Mohammed bin Salman the minute his father is no longer with us. There are others who think that he could survive because his reforms are popular. So I just don't know, but that's a hugely important question, frankly, because it also goes to the stability of Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ambassador Ann Patrick, we're out of time. Great analysis, Miss Ambassador, as always. Ann Patrick, former ambassador, U.S., Pakistan, Egypt, now the president of the U.S. Qatar Business Council. Miss Ambassador, thank you for being with us.
No, thank you very much. Always a pleasure.